So let's go ahead and review what we did yesterday, right? So what were we working on? We called it spray and pray board. So users are able to let other users know how many jobs they've applied for just by clicking on their name. And then also we had a delete a user option. So we covered get requests to retrieve these users, and then put requests to update the count, and then finally a delete request to actually delete a user, right? So that's what we have so far. The handle update we did, the handle delete. So what I want to do today, the final category I don't think we discussed is create, right? So we didn't do anything about asking the database to create some new information. So how are we going to do that, and what does that look like? So our objective is a new form where you can enter a user's name. So submit user. So just a input box where you can submit a new user's name. Click submit user, and then it'll go ahead and make another user. So how do we send? We're on the front end, right? And we want to communicate to the back end. How do we send a request to the back end? What does that request look like? Where do we go to find out what the back end needs to send a request? Ronald.
We go to like the API docs.
Yeah, so I have the docs right here. And what's the category of request we're trying to make to create some new information?
To create, it's gonna be the post.
Yeah. So the path is telling us is going to be /users. Here's a little example of what it's going to look like. The method is post. Headers. What's the point of headers again, Ronald?
It's kind of like metadata, or kind of like letting the server know that we're sending like JSON.
Yeah. And we're sending it right here, our JSON in the body. Yep. And then it'll tell us what to expect for a response. So let's just get a form going first of all. How can I get a form to show up? And what I want to do is actually create a new component for this form. So I'm going to call it new user.jsx. So I want to create a new React component called new user. I know someone yesterday, or not someone, Hara, I believe, asked me yesterday, can your component file name be the same as your React component name? And mine almost always are the same. So I want it to create a new React component called new user that just displays the words new user for now. How can I do that, Ryan?
Export default function.
Beautiful.
So I usually start and call it new user, parentheses, curly brackets.
Braces. Yep.
Yeah. And you want to return a div, right?
Sure. Okay, nothing shows up on my screen yet. How can I get the words new user to appear, Tara?
Pass the component into the app.jx in the return.
Yeah. So I'm going to start typing here. VS Code IntelliSense shows up. What shortcut do I use to auto import? Tara.
Return, I guess. If you enter, it will,
Tab. Yeah.
or do you mean?
If I press tab, it'll auto import it for me at the top.
Oh, at the
here.
top. Oh, okay. Okay.
Yep. I rely on this feature so much. I will sometimes forget how to import things, which I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, but I just
if I
love
just write
auto importing. Yeah, go ahead.
If I just write the component, it shows up at the top. Like I don't have to press tab. That's why I was
If you write the component like at the top
like,
here.
no. If I finish writing out, like, you know how you had new user. So if I close that bracket, it does it. I don't think I've pressed tab before.
Just like that?
Mm-hmm.
On mine, it won't auto import it. If I don't think. Let's try it. Yeah, I don't think so.
I think because you use the bracket, try without the bracket typing it.
Without the bracket, the angle bracket.
You could type just the word kind of, and it'll also.
Well, yeah, if you
like,
do just the
auto-
word, then maybe
Yeah.
we can tab that.
Oh no.
Although that
Tab it.
looks weird now. So anyway, you can play around with it. But what works for me is starting to type it and then pressing tab. Okay, we see the words new user, so we know it's rendering correctly. But what we don't want the words new user. We want a form with an input and a button to click to submit a new user. So how can I get started on that, Monica?
Use the form tag
Yeah, form tag.
and then input
And then inside there an input. Awesome.
and a placeholder.
Yeah, placeholder would be nice. What should we say?
All right, I forgot. What are we adding? The
Oh,
name?
a new user. So enter
Oh, new.
name of new user. Yep. And then what do we do next, Renata, to get that button?
We just create a button and type submit.
Yeah. Okay. Very nice. So we talked about this a bit yesterday. When we do any kind of input in React, it has to be controlled, right? So, let's pick on Ryan, right? Because he didn't do controlled last time. So Ryan, how can I make this be a controlled React input?
You need a piece of state.
Yep. What's a good name for the new user's name?
User? I don't know.
User I'm not going to do because user is going to be floating around other places. I'm going to call it name. What's the default value of the input that the user's typing in?
An empty string.
Yeah, awesome. And then to satisfy the gods of React, what attributes do I need in this input?
A name.
Name is optional. Name is optional.
Value.
We need value, and what do we point that to?
Name.
Correct. And we need what other attribute? Every time I type,
Change.
yeah, every time I type, I want to change the value of my state. So I need an onChange that will fire. And what is this on?
E.target.value.
E.target.value is the value of what they're currently typing in. But how do I update my name state to be match this value?
You would set the name.
Yeah. So now React should be happy, right? So now we're saving every keystroke, we're saving that name in our state. Now what? Now how do we, when we either click submit user or I press enter, I want to fire a function right now. For right now, it's just console.logs. I'll get to work entering a new user. How can I do that? David, how can I get a function to fire when this form is submitted?
Yeah, so on the form, you need a on submit attribute,
Yeah.
and it's going to have a callback function
What's a good
or
name?
a handler. It's a handler submit form, something like that.
We might have more than one form. So handle, add, user. Yeah. How do I define that function?
You're going to do const.
Let's use function declarations.
Oh, okay. So function, and then handle add user. And it's going to take an argument of user. Is that right?
So is user defined right now? Or I guess technically we're writing a function, so it doesn't have to be defined. Let's come back to the inputs because we can talk about it now. I don't think we need an input because does the block line 10, does that have access to our name state? Yes or no? Can I console.log name here per the rules of scope, David?
I feel like you would be able to, yes.
Yeah, it's outside. It's the parent. It's in the parent scope, and any child can access parent scope. So I don't think we actually need an input. So we'll hold off on that. But for right now, well, I guess I can still write that. But for right now, let's put in David. And then my whole screen is refreshing, which is kind of ugly, right? How can I stop that?
Prevent default.
Yeah.
Event.prevent default.
Yep. So it turns out we do need an input. We need that event.
Max.
Yeah.
Do you mean that it's the parent scope because on line 16 how it's how on submit is handle user and I guess the name is part of that whole form or the state?
No, this part doesn't really matter. This is just referencing the function. Where we define the function is what's determining its scope. So it has access to it because it's written here, and this function is written inside of this other function. And this is name exists within all this curly braces. And handle add user exists within the curly braces too. So this is just normal rules of scope. Remember our global variables when we were using DOM stuff, right? Everyone had access to it, bottles, because it was global. It's kind of similar. Okay, so we have David, we're submitting, but nothing's happening. Where do I go again to find out how I need to send this request, Rodrigo? I'm on the front end. What's that?
To the API docs.
Yeah, so I'm going to go to the docs. Here it is. I'm just going to copy it and then see what needs to change. So Rodrigo, let's step through this. And do we have API right now?
No, I think
No.
they don't have.
But we can have it, but we have to import it. So actually there's another shortcut I use, Control Spacebar will give like kind of auto suggestions. And one of the suggestions is to auto import this. So yeah, the same thing can happen if you type it, but I find myself, if it's already typed, you don't need to delete it. You can just press Control Spacebar. Okay, we imported API. That's nice. Does this path have to change? No, that's the path they gave us. Is this method good? Kim, what do you think? We're asking the database to create a new user. Is post the correct method for creating something?
Yes.
Yeah, and what do you think about this headers? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think the only thing that's different is the name part.
Yeah. And what do we, so what would be the problem if we left in John always?
It'll always come up as John.
Yeah. So I think we could actually see this right now. Doesn't matter what name I submit. If I click refresh, it's always John. So how do I have to change this line, Kim? Where's the actual value of what the user's typing in stored?
Name.
Yeah, so we could put name here, but you almost never see that in JavaScript because we have a shortcut we can use, which is what?
I don't remember.
I actually don't know if we ever covered this, but this is a very common syntax shortcut. Does anyone know? So if you have a key and a value, the same name, you can just put it like that, and it's equivalent. And you'll always see it like this. In fact, I think I've been writing it like this and not realizing I never touched on this yet. But they're equivalent. Okay, so the funny part is this is already working without us doing the extra work of awaiting and converting the response like we always have to do. And then I'm getting red squigglies here. What do I have to do to fix that bug, Daniel? Await expressions are only allowed within async functions.
It has to be an async function.
Yeah, so I have to put the word async here. And now, to improve the user experience, after I type in Daniel and press submit user, oh, we have an error. What did I do? Oh, whoops. So when I type in Jazz and I click submit, I don't get an error, so I'm assuming it's working and entering into the database, but I also don't see it on my screen, so it's not a great user experience. So what do I want to do here? What should we do for a better user experience?
Do you want to pass in your fetch users from the previous?
Yeah, we want to fetch users, right? But this is in a separate module, and modules don't share information automatically. So where is fetch users? Because if we try this now, we'll get an error. Fetch users lives here. So what are some ideas? How can we pass this to a child component?
You can send it as a prop.
Yeah, we can send it as a prop. And I think this is our first use case for actually sending a prop. So how do we do that, David?
A new user, you would just do a space and then call it whatever user, what is it, user fetch or fetch user?
Yeah, I would just name it the same thing, but we can call it whatever we want, correct?
And then in curly brackets, put the actual fetch users. And yeah, I think that's it, right?
Yeah, that's it. Okay. Well, it's not it. So now we're passing it down to new user, but in new user, what has to go in the parameter now?
Props, right?
Props, right. And if we console.log props, what data type will we see?
Function.
No. I worded it kind of tricky, the question. What data type is props always?
I'm not sure.
Object?
It's an object, and what property will it have?
Fetch property.
Yeah, a key called fetch users, and the value of that will be the function. Yeah. And now what you'll always see, this is a little, Should we touch on this now? Maybe tomorrow. That might be too much. Destructuring. We'll talk tomorrow maybe. So anyway, to access the props we passed down, we now need to do props.fetch users, right? That's the actual function. So here, I can do props.fetch users. And now we delete Adam. We rewrite Adam. And we got him back. Questions on that?
Hey, Max, I've got a question.
Yeah.
If your fetch users is defined in a component,
Yeah.
is there any way for a component to use fetch users if it's defined in a component rather than the parent app.jsx?
Like, can we export it? Is that your question?
No. Yeah, right. So right now you're in the parent.
Yeah.
But if I had, for example, defined my my fetch functions inside of a component, but then I have another component that relies on fetching users or messages or whatever, is there any way for me to export a function from one component to another?
It depends on the relationship. Are they siblings or are they parent and child?
They would be siblings.
Then no. You would have to raise this up. It's called raising state.
Okay.
Yeah. So children can only inherit from their parents.
So if I created a custom hook that fetched data, how would that work? Is that a way for me to have all my components be able to basically fetch data and re-render the display?
It's another approach. So you'd have another folder here, maybe called API, and you would put this function in there and just export it. The problem is with that approach, in my opinion, is what? Why is this line a problem? Because you need access to like setting users. So then you're passing set users to this external function. And I don't know. In my opinion, it just looks nicer and is easier here, living here. But there's different strategies for this. Any other questions on that?
Yeah, so just to clarify, like in the component we just made, you had a function inside it, but because it was directly related to the form that was inside the component, a good practice would be to keep it inside. Like functions that have to do with the component you're in is good practice to keep them in the same component, but then a function that is being shared across your entire application, like this fetch users, that's standard to put it at the very top, like not anywhere else.
Exactly. The stuff that everyone is going to use goes all the way up. The stuff that only name is going to be used by this new user form. No other component cares about name at all. So it lives here. Also, this handle add user, this component is the only one that's going to ever care about sending a request to the server to add a new user. So it lives here. Fetch users is used by everyone. So it lives high up in the granddaddy parent of app.jsx.
So hypothetically speaking, can you scroll down a little bit just so you can kind of see? So hypothetically speaking, you could even put your everything underneath your line 41. You could put that in its own component with a handle delete, handle likes.
We're gonna make this its own component. Yeah, I think that's our next step, actually. Yeah, because this shouldn't be living here. It's kind of polluting app with all this code.
And then what would go with it would be the handle likes and handle delete, because that's part of that.
Exactly.
Component.
And that's what actually we're going to do right now. Are there any questions before we start working on that? So we're, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. the props dot, what was it, Jace? Fetch users. So you pass the props in to the function new users from the parent on line 7.
55 is how we pass it. Yep.
Yes.
And then
Or bring it in, sorry.
and then we're
there's line
receiving it
7.
in props automatically, but then we're using it here. Yep.
Okay. My question was going to be, why is it props dot function fetch users? I mean,
So you'll
Instead,
So is the word props reserved in React then? Like, is that specifically for when you're passing in things into a component?
what's
Or
your
can that
guess?
be anything?
Will this work still or not?
Like if it was Daniel.fetchUsers, I don't know. Maybe, yeah.
That's what a guess is. You got to guess.
so question to me, instead put the pop, can we put the first user? Or
What's that?
like instead you put the pop, you put the first user, right? In the one you pass the pop.
Yeah, but if we call this fetch users, that's a lie, because fetch users will actually be an object. So you could write that. It would just be really confusing
Okay.
because it's an object.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter what you call it, except it does matter because everyone in the React ecosystem knows of this as props. So it's a strong best practice. Except the story gets more complicated because almost always we do what's called destructuring, where we, instead of this is the intermediate step. So we can use fetch users like this, and this will work. But we have something called destructuring, where if we wrap the curly braces and then point it at an object, we're grabbing that one property and saving it in a variable called fetch users in this case. And then go ahead.
With that same idea, like what you just did earlier, can you put that right there?
Yeah.
Can you just
So
put
this is the
bracket?
real React way that you'll see it. We do the destructuring right in the parameter. This is what I was holding off on showing just because I think it's hard, but is that not hard? I don't I don't know. You guys can tell me, is that too much? Or this is the real React way you'll see it. So we're destructuring, an object is coming in, we're destructuring it, grabbing just the fetch users property, saving that as a variable, and that's what's going on that line. Maybe we'll keep it like this.
Can you write the previous
can we
steps
keep it
and just comment it out?
Yeah, sure.
Can we keep it as the previous one just because it'll be a little easier?
Oh, I didn't mean that.
Or I mean, whatever you guys want.
The destructured, previous to the destructured.
Let's do this today. Tomorrow, maybe we'll do. Okay, so that's what's going on there. Yeah, this is fine for today. Okay, what did I say? Oh, now we want to. The app is getting too large, so we want to take out this logic and extract it to its own component. So I'm going to do a component called user. How can I write a new React component that just displays the word user right now? Jazz?
You put export default and then you create a function declaration. Function users.
User, just one of them. And I said I want to return a div.
And then a return state.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, nothing showing up on my screen though, Jazz. Actually, first, I guess first things first, let's do a sanity check that the new function we wrote works. So I'm going to use the empty, whoops. This is always scary screwing with this because it can get so messy. Yeah, like I already did. Can we save this? There we go. So how can I see the new function that I wrote, Jazz? How can I invoke it?
You put the opening tag and then user.
Yeah, so I know this is hard to remember. I have trouble too, but this is a left angle bracket. And then we start typing new user. I tab it to auto import it. Oh no, not new user. I'm sorry. User. And I tab it to auto import. And then it shows up. It's showing up everywhere. Yeah, which makes sense. But now I said the whole point was I want to extract this logic and put it in user. So let's see if we can do that without everything dying. And now we have to work through the errors, right? So our first error, do we have access to user from our user component? Giang? And if not, how can we get it? How can I re-get access to this user object?
Okay. You can send a prop from app inside user. You can like user, equal like curly braces user.
Very nice. That's step one, kind of exporting it or passing it as a prop. And then here, what do I have to call this?
A prop.
Props.
Yeah.
And then here, how can I? Well, here, let me show you destructuring for this one.
Yeah, I think it's better.
So this is an example of destructuring right here. So you'll get a little bit of it today. And this is equivalent to this. Okay. So now let's see what errors we still have. Oh, not bad. Each child in the list should have a unique key prop. Okay. Well, that I can probably fix by giving this a key, even though now they both need a key, which is a little weird, but whatever, as long as React's happy. So no errors when I start the app, but when I try to delete Daniel, who has a guess what's going to happen?
Just a question. The user that you're passing in as props is your state, right? In the previous one?
Not really. I mean, it's kind of state, but it's really coming from this map method. Every item all the objects in the array of state. I mean, it is state. You're right. The map method is iterating through, and then we're passing one at a time. So the user component is being rendered 5 times, which is pretty cool. So it's an array of like 5 user components that are being rendered. And Daniel, what do you think is going to happen when we try to delete you? So this is going to fire.
Nothing, because we don't have access to handle delete in here.
We don't have access. We get an error. Handle delete is not defined. How can we? Well, we have 2 options. We could pass handle delete, but better than that, I think we should actually just cut these both out and paste them in user. But now we have to worry about, do we have access to all this stuff? So do we have access to API? And if not, how can we get it? Zach? In this module, do we have access to API right now?
I don't think so, no.
No. So we can delete the I, retype it to auto import it. That's nice. User will have access to because it's passing in as a parameter. But we do have some errors. So let's see what they... Oh, use effect is not defined. How can we fix... Wait, where are we using use effect? Oh, did I copy this by accident? I think I copied this by accident. This still should be in app.jsx. Yeah. Sorry. Okay, so no errors. Very nice. Is it going to work when I delete Daniel? I think it might. Oh, no, it's not going to. And somebody tell me why. Why is this going to break?
Do we still need to pass in fetch users to this too?
Yeah, so how can I pass that in?
Give it a new prop. Fetch. Can you just copy and paste the fetch users prop?
I
and then
can,
pass
yeah.
that in?
And now I can destructure. Oh, I can do better than that. With destructuring, I can just write a comma here to say I also want to grab fetch users. So we'll do that. And now when I delete Daniel, I think it'll work. Yeah. All right, a lot of code, a lot of passing of props. What questions do you have on these two components now? This is the first day we're really like writing a actual React application where we're multiple components interacting, passing props. Yeah.
Yeah. So Max, when you're building an app, then, and since you have to consider what your, components are going to be and whatnot, I mean, is it worth it just taking a lot of time to write this down on paper, or how should this all be designed? Because I feel like right now when I write code, I just kind of jump into it, and then I'm spending more time trying to correct my organization than I am maybe if I spent the time to like pre-plan how this was going to unfold.
Yeah, I'm guilty of, I don't know if I'd use the word guilty, but I guess I'm guilty of the same exact thing. When I start a project, I try to do the simplest, littlest thing I can and just keep building. I definitely don't like go to Excalidraw and plan out my components. I'm sure there's 1,000 YouTube tutorials that say you should. I just answering honestly, I never have. It's just not my style, but that's something you'll have to develop and kind of have an intuition about as you practice more and more React. What works for you? It's going to be different for everyone. I definitely do jump right in and do as little as possible, the easiest little thing, and then build and build and build. And then sometimes scrap. Like when I first wrote Milkman, it was so dirty. And then I just deleted all of it and started again with a better strategy. Yeah.
Can I see your component on your app.js?
Sure.
So you're still mapping it out, and then inside that you're rendering the user component every single time for your user array. Okay, cool. I was just kind of still confused how you're passing in that prop, but it kind of makes sense now.
So technically we could take this a step further and have a users component, but it's not necessary at this point. App is pretty slim. So I think we're good. Okay, so we successfully created a user, right? Yeah. So the hardest objective of today, we want to edit a user. So Bradley, I forgot to capitalize, right? So I actually want to be able to edit Bradley. Editing a user's name is going to be very similar to which component do you think of these two? What's your guess? One of these is going to be almost identical. Displaying an individual user or the form to enter a new user? What's going to be very similar to editing a user?
I guess displaying a user.
No, the form to enter a new user is going to be almost everything we need to edit a user. So let me show you the objective of what I want. I want a little box right now under each of these names where we can type in and edit. Right now, this is very ugly, right? But we'll pretty it up as we go. But that's our objective. I want a form under each of these names to edit. So what I'm actually going to do is create a whole copy of new user, change its name to edit user, and then I'm going to go through this and ask you guys what we think needs to change. So, Zach, what's a good name for our edit user component?
Edit user.
Edit user. Do you think we're still going to need to fetch users?
Yes.
Yes, I think so too. Are we still going to need a place for a user to put in a new name?
Yes.
Yes. What's a better name than handle add user going to be?
Change existing user.
Handle edit user, I think would be good.
Handle edit.
Yeah. Now, Zach, what's the path? And if we don't know, how can we find out how to edit a user?
Is this going to be in the docs?
Yep, exactly. So we go to the docs. What's the HTTP verb associated with editing? Put. Yeah. So here we go. We see that the path they want is a user/user ID. So that's going to be interesting. We somehow here need a user ID. So we'll have to think about that maybe in a second. We'll come back to that. The method here, how does that have to change, Victor? Oh, and here's a bug in my code. What's my bug, Victor?
It's supposed to be
Put.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can we edit this? Put method put. Okay. Okay. So is headers looking good, Victor? What do you think?
Think so?
Yep. We're still sending JSON. We're always sending JSON, right? Unless we're not, unless we don't have a body. What about our body, Victor? To edit a user, to send a request to the server, do they just need a name? What do you think?
Yeah, because that's what they're changing, right?
Exactly, yeah. You see count here, but we don't have to provide a count because we're not updating count. Here, this is going to be the same. We still probably want to fetch users when we're done because things are going to be out of sync. So that's probably all fine. And then here we'll call handle edit user. And then here we'll say enter new name. And here we'll say edit user. Nothing obviously is going to show up yet. But I want the little box for my component to show up for each of these. So where can I do that and how can I do that? I want to render my edit user inside of each of these components. What do we think?
Add a button to the user component.
Not a button. We're going to add the whole damn what?
Form? Or not form,
Component?
Yeah, the whole component. So edit user. Let's see how god awful this looks. Pretty awful, right? So let's make this wider. That's better, I guess. So now, I wonder if this will actually work. No, No, there was one problem we still had, right? We need to fix, or we need to think about, this needs access to a user ID. How can we get this to have access to a user ID? We basically need like to be able to do that for this to work. Any ideas there?
You make your on submit an anonymous function, I think, and then you pass in the user as an argument.
Yeah, so we need user here. That's correct. But how do we access, do we have access to user in this module? And if not, how can we get it?
Pass it as a prop.
Yeah, awesome. And where do we do that?
Well, you have to put props in your argument. Do we already have that?
No, I don't think we do. Well, yeah. So here we're going to have to do, with destructuring, well, first let's export it, or it's a little weird. So first I need to pass it from the parent. So how can I do that? Right here.
User equals user and curly brace.
Awesome. And then in edit user, how can I use destructuring to grab my user object?
Const user or curly braces user equals props.
Very nice. So now we have access to user. Oh, actually, we don't need to do this because we have access to the user in the whole component. So we did too much work, right? Because the user is accessible everywhere, including in here. So we don't have to pass it here. It's easier. I think we might be good. Let's try. So Bradley, we said we want a capital B. Although I'm noticing another problem as I'm typing. Fetch users is not a function, although it did work. Wait, why isn't edit user? Are we passing? Oh, okay. So why is fetch users not a function? What did we forget to do?
You have to import it, right?
Not import. Not import.
You haven't sent that prop.
We have to send it as a prop.
Edit user. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, let's try again. So, I don't know. Doesn't matter. Oh, Brad. Let's pause there. What questions do you have? We're going kind of fast, right? There's a lot. This is pretty dense, this lecture.
Yeah, I do have a question. Where you declared state for name.
Declared state for name. Yep.
Yeah, line 13. We define that in another component. Can we copy and paste it from somewhere?
We have name. Oh yeah, we have name and new user, right?
Okay, so is there no conflict?
Nope.
When you declare two name states like that?
No. Yeah, none at all.
Even if you've done the same thing in the parent, would there be a conflict?
There wouldn't be a conflict. It would just be dirt. It would be gross because you would have a props called name and you would have a piece of state called name. It would just be a bad design, but it wouldn't actually technically be a conflict. Remember
So
Ronald's fancy word for this? Shadowing or whatever?
So this kind of acts like a local variable, like a local state.
It's actually not shadowing because they exist in different places and have different names, but it feels the same, right? If we have a global called student and then in a little for loop we have another student, they both exist, but it's just it's not a great feeling to have, right? Like the same variable name existing in different scopes. Although here it makes total sense because these two aren't really interacting with each other.
Max, for the props, couldn't you destructure them inside the parameters just by putting like curly
Yeah, you
braces?
guys rejected that. You said not today. It was too early. But you absolutely can. And that's the way you're going to always see it. But we'll do it tomorrow. Oh, okay. What I'd like to probably end on. So right now, this editing user is showing up all the time. I think it would look much nicer if edit user initially didn't show up at all. So on line 35, how can we brainstorm a way that initially edit user, the component, doesn't actually show up on the screen at all?
A conditional state.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this in curly braces. And for right now, I'm just going to make some code that looks weird and do this. Say false end. And now our edit user component is never showing up. But sometimes we want it to show up, right? So sometimes we do want it to show up. So we basically need some what to control whether or not it shows up. We need a new piece of state. So I'm going to call this is editing user. And then I'm going to create a new piece of state called is editing user. And initially, what value do I want this to be? What did I say?
False.
Exactly. So, what did we do? Oh, use state is not defined. I have to auto import it. Sure. So initially, they're never showing up, which is fine. But sometimes I do want to be able to edit a user. Specifically, maybe if they click on like an edit, a little pencil emoji. So if they click on this pencil, and I'm noticing we have other problems in this app. Maybe you guys are noticing too, but we'll think about that later. When they click on this pencil, I now want to see my editing user component. So this becomes fun. How can I get my user component to show up when I click the pencil?
You can create a handler for that span.
Yep. What would that look like?
On click.
Yeah.
And then give it an empty arrow.
Yep.
Yeah, and then you were going to change the state that you're comparing with. Like, what is it called? Is editing set?
Yeah. Set is editing user
to true.
To true. Exactly. Yeah. And that's it. And now we see the form. Except now, what if the user changes their mind? What if the user changes their mind and what do I want to do here? A button that says cancel. So they click cancel. They've changed their mind. We have some problems, though. We have a couple problems that are piling up with this app. But how can they now hide this form again? And this is tricky.
Do you have to pass down the state and then set it to false?
Yeah. So we are going to have to pass down, not the state, no, but we are going to have to pass down which of these two?
Set?
Yeah. Now it needs the ability to set is editing user. So we pass it that ability, that superpower. And now how can I destructure that property I want? Ketzerin, how can I destructure the property of set is editing user that I'm passing down?
Put the set new user.
Set is editing user. Yep. And then to use it, how can I use it? So what we said when I click cancel, I want to set is editing user to false. What do I have to do here?
On click
Yeah, I can do an on click.
and callback function. Yeah.
Yeah,
and
little callback function
set edit user
to.
to 4, I think.
Yeah. So let's try this, right? We want it. Let's ignore that. Let's edit Brad. I change my mind and click cancel, although we have another problem. A button inside the form, if it's clicked, will automatically submit. So I think if we prevent the default, it'll not do that. I hope, but let's see. So I click Brad, I change my mind, and it canceled successfully without submitting the form.
Should we also add that set is editing user to false when we edit the user? Because we want to, once we submit that, would we want to hide the form again?
That's a good point. So how can we do that right here?
Set editing user equals or false.
Yeah.
Inside.
That is a good improvement. So Jazz becomes Victor, right? I click edit user and now the form disappears. That's a really good improvement. I think there's another. Oh, no, never mind. And then there's one bug we have, a logic bug, right? And who notices what that bug is?
Is it your counters?
Yeah, my counter when I'm clicking edit is going up. So there's probably two ways I could do that. Does anyone have a brainstorm though? Where are we first of all? Where's our pencil? So this, when I click this, is firing this user update, and I don't really want it to be. So does anyone have any ideas there? There's a few things we could do.
Is that a side effect? I'm not sure.
It's not, is it a side effect? No, it's an event that's bubbling up out of control.
No, do we use set effect to control it?
No. Or I don't know what set effect is, or in this context, I don't know.
Wait, are you talking about event propagation? Or
That's the technical term for the situation we're facing. Yeah.
I meant use effect, but it's still wrong.
Okay. So I think might be the easiest is just maybe we can prevent the default. Although I'm really not sure on this one, but we can try. So I click. No, that didn't work.
Specify to only work when clicking in a specific spot. Like
yeah, that's like the easier solution. So here, just take out the on click, and let's put it just in this div where the user counts, and maybe so they have to click here to update, and maybe we'll give a little upvote emoji.
I turned the counter into a button.
Yes, that too.
Event stop propagation.
Yeah, or we could do that. That might be cleaner. Event stop propagation. Is that it, Ronald?
I'm not sure. I mean, I looked it up, but I mean, I wasn't sure if that's what you're looking for.
I use it so infrequently I have to look it up too. Stop propagation, yeah. Okay, let's see if that works first off. Let's put this back. Yeah. Because we shouldn't have yeah. Except there's going to be other problems I'm thinking of now, but we'll see if this works. So it worked. We stopped the propagation of the form capturing that event. And I think we'll end it there before we go down the rabbit hole of just more and more and more. This was a really dense lecture.
For some reason, the Victor thing ended up putting the form outside the box. Is that another bug?
Where? Edit user?
On the webpage, you see
Oh.
Victor's box. The form went all the way down. Is that?
Oh no! This form
that's separate.
Yeah, that's separate.
Oh, okay.
That's our new user form. It's separate from the edit user form.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
I was mistaken.
And then another bug. Do you guys notice this one? But I'll let you guys have fun with that or think about that.
Count going up.
Yep. Yeah. Another bug. All right. Final questions. I'll give you all this code. I'll give you the whole folder. So you just download it and open it in VS Code, and you can see all this code. All right. Let's go to breakout rooms.